Judges chapter 9. Abimelech, the anti-judge. So we're in the middle of the book theologically and almost chronologically. This is the longest chapter of the book of Judges by quite a lot. I have a very simplistic outline for this. It's by no means fair to the contents because it just lumps everything into basically one big centerpiece. But we're going to go over the initial murders, 70 of them in just 6 verses. And then we'll move on to the big curse, which is the bulk of the chapter, verses 7 to 41. That isn't a typo. And then the last, less than 10, no, more than 10, 15 verses or so, destruction at the end. There's a lot of mayhem that goes on at the very end of the chapter. This is a tough read. I would like to take you through it. I don't want to belittle what's happening, but I decided that the best way to help us through what is a very difficult thing was to use some pictures of some real bad guys. And so whenever we talk about Abimelech, you're going to see this man. Does anybody know who he actually is? This is an actual bad guy. It is John Dillinger. And I will be using actual photographs of John Dillinger as Abimelech throughout the chapter. We have a couple of other people to look at, but he's the main one, okay? Just as last Sunday, I was teaching Nehemiah, and we had the enemies of Israel. And I don't know if you were there, but did you catch that I was using the 4 Marx brothers? Yes. As Israel's worst enemies? I don't know. There's no subliminal message there. I just thought I would do that. Did you know, though, that after, you know that the Marx brothers were Jewish. Did you know that after World War II, Groucho went to Germany, to Berlin, to the bunker, to the pile of rubble where Hitler's body had been taken and disposed of? He climbed up onto the top, and for an hour he danced on what counts as Hitler's grave. Yeah, Groucho very visibly, publicly did that. He said it was the most exhausting, emotionally thing he ever did in his life, but he danced for an hour on Hitler's grave. All right, that may not be the last time we talk about Hitler tonight. Chapter 9. Now Abimelech, son of Jerubbaal, went to Shechem to his uncles on his mother's side. That detail is important because his dad was Gideon, the great judge of the last several chapters. But now he goes to the other side of the family, his mother's relatives, and says to them and to his mother's whole clan, "Say this in the hearing of all the citizens of Shechem, which is better for you, that all 70 of the sons of Jerubbaal rule over you, or that one rule over you? Remember that I am your flesh and blood." Now, the thing is, they didn't have 70 rulers. The sons of Gideon were not ruling as judges over the people of Shechem. They were just there. In fact, they were just leading citizens. That's all they were. They were businessmen and things like that, and farmers and whatever. But now he makes it sound like something different. He spins something different. Oh, I forgot to read this. I meant to read this, and there's still time to do it. So I wrote this 8 years ago. I want to make sure that we've got the chronology clear, that this was before some current events had taken place. Okay, but I wrote this 8 years ago. Here we see, this is Judges 9, here we see just how outrageous things can get when one small, mean, and ambitious man discovers that if you say something loudly enough and in public, people will begin to believe you. Abimelech spat out falsehoods and outright lies without any evidence at all to back up his outrageous innuendos, and he turned an entire tribe against sanity and the truth. We live in a time where, for the last decade, I suppose, maybe, what are they called? Those people on TikTok, influencers? Or they kind of used to be called that anyway. I don't know if they call them anymore, but they do this, and many others too. Okay. All right. I mostly like the guys who just tell dad jokes. That's funny. People were shocked when they found out I'm not a certified electrician. I like that one. I like it. Okay, we'll just go on. All right. Anyway. Ironically, he also talks about flesh and blood here, that he's going to spill a lot of blood. Although I do want to mention that the Hebrew idiom is not flesh and blood. It's actually blood and bone. It's a different idiom, but flesh and blood is what we would say. So the translator's a traitor. Okay. So his mother's relatives repeated all this on his behalf in the hearing of all the citizens of Shechem, and they were inclined to follow Abimelech, for they said, he's our brother. They gave him 70 silver shekels from the temple of Baal Berith, and Abimelech used it to hire worthless and reckless men who became his followers. So 70 shekels. Somebody else hired scoundrels and ruthless vagabonds and stuff. Remember who that was in the Bible? David. That was David's entourage before he became king. He had all these guys, just whoever was a decent fighter, he picked up, and some of them weren't Israelites. Uriah was a Hittite and so forth, and David picked up those guys. But when David did it, it was to God's glory. It was with great success. But Abimelech is just a different kind of guy. He went to his father's house at Ophrah and killed his brothers, the sons of Jerubbaal, 70 men on one stone. This is actually a painting of that event. I think it's by Tissot, I'm not sure. But you can see now what the entourage was for, the bushwhackers and the cowboys and whatever else he got to help him. Obviously, they did something. They tricked the brothers. We're not told all the details. How'd they get them all? Hey, come to our house for a banquet or something, and then they were all obviously captured in some way, whether they were tied up or locked in a room or a tower or whatever it was, or just at spear point or whatever. And then they brought them. Probably 4 or 5 guys would bring one guy in, hold him down on the stone, and Abimelech, who is obviously a murderer, but also a coward and kind of lazy, bring him here in front of me and then I'll kill him and I get all the glory. Have you ever seen, I just made a recording of it, of Henry IV, Part 1, one of the Falstaff plays in Shakespeare. So it's a history and a comedy at the same time. And so there's this fat knight named Falstaff. And toward the end of the play, Prince Henry, the guy who's going to become Henry V, has a terrible battle with the main antagonist, a guy named Hotspur. And they have a vicious, vicious battle, and Henry finally kills Hotspur toward the end. It's in Act 5, right? And then, you're like emotionally drained, as an audience member, like, wow, the things they were saying back and forth and all this. And then they all leave, and in rolls, and I'm using the word precisely, Falstaff, who's enormously fat, right? But trying to be a knight in the battlefield. He finds Hotspur. He says, famously, I missed the battle, but caution is the better part of valor. And what he does is he takes his sword and stabs the dead body. And then, in what turns out being a very comical scene, tries to pick up this guy in full armor to carry him off, like, hey, look who I killed, and so he ends up with like his legs over his shoulders, and he's like walking around, and the guy's head's like banging on the stage as he's walking past him. And so he's like a coward trying to do this. And we have something like that happening here from Abimelech. But Jotham, this will always be the picture I use for Jotham. And I put the J on his letter sweater so you'd know who he is, right? So it was a B, I think, originally. I had to change it this morning. But Jotham, the youngest son of Jerubbaal, escaped by hiding himself. I don't know if he really went to college or where he went, but he left and he hides himself. So one guy escapes. 70 brothers die. One escapes. And then they take Abimelech, all the citizens of Shechem and all Beth Millo, the house of the Phil, whatever that is in the area, a valley house or something, or village. They gathered by the oak at the pillar of Shechem, and they made Abimelech king. So he's crowned king. I think it's significant that they didn't even invite anybody else, not even the rest of Manasseh, which is where this happened, not even Gad, which is a couple miles to the east, not even from Ephraim, which is actually only a mile or two. It's actually only a couple hundred yards to the south. They don't invite any of these people to come. We're going to crown a king. Really, Abimelech shows that what he wanted was not to be a king and a leader. He wanted a trophy. I want to have been king. He doesn't want to do it. He just wants it as something he can put on his shelf, like some kind of a prize. And they make Abimelech king. The oak at Shechem is mentioned several times in the Bible, and here, this is the last time I believe it's mentioned, this particular tree, but it goes back to the days of Abraham, which is 600 years ago. Abraham is around 2000 BC. This is around 1400, or a little later even. So, wow, how big would a 600-year-old oak be? Actually, we have 300-year-old oak trees in America. Like out east. There are oaks that were there before the American Revolution and so forth. I don't know if there are any trees we can identify that go all the way back to like the Pilgrims or Columbus or anything like that.
Those trees out on the west coast, I can't remember what they're called.
Oh, the sequoias?
These are kind of...
Oh, I know what you mean. Like the Joshua trees or whatever they are. They're all, yeah, I know the ones that you mean.
Looks like they grow out of cracks in the rocks.
Yeah, exactly.
Those are supposedly thousands of years.
Yeah. I know what you're talking about. Yeah. Well, Abraham built an altar at this tree, the oak at Shechem. Jacob, when his wife, his beloved Rachel, stole her father's gods, she stole Laban's gods, Jacob buried them here. This is where he put them in the ground. Joshua had drawn up a covenant and he set it there at this place at Shechem under this tree. And now Abimelech is made king there. This is a long line of things that have happened at this famous place. Okay? That takes us this far in the account. Any questions that far? You want that slide back on? I'm happy to give you the slide back. Anything for the mother of the bride? We've got a wedding happening in this family soon. September?
Yes.
Right.
September 23rd.
That's just after Earth, Wind, and Fire Day. The 21st night of September. Sorry, that's just a lyric of a song. I mentioned that group earlier today. Why was that? Because, I was describing, it was last night at worship committee, I was describing, I bought a kalimba years ago on Washington Island in Wisconsin, and it's an African finger piano. I used it in a children's devotion once, many years ago. Wrote a song with the kids and played it on the kalimba right there in front of church. Okay, let's get on. Are we ready? Curse, verses 7 to 41. Back to Jotham. Okay? By the way, Jotham will disappear at verse 21, never to appear again in the Bible, but his name shows up. One of the last kings of Judah is named after him. Isaiah becomes a prophet in the days of King Uzziah, and Uzziah named his son Jotham after this guy, I believe. Anyway, when they told Jotham, he climbed to the summit of Mount Gerizim. Wow, what an event this was. Mount Gerizim, up on top, is a tough, gray, rocky, spiny crag, more reminiscent of what are they called in Switzerland and Italy? The Alps. Like those, where mountains, like little kids draw mountains, like how pointy can I make the pointy top? That's what the top of Mount Gerizim is like. So he climbs all the way up there. The advantage is that there's a natural amphitheater below and a valley, and then Mount Ebal is on the other side. So your voice will carry. God had Moses command Joshua to read all these blessings and curses in this place when they came from the into the promised land years before this. And because it's all the acoustics are just exactly right for that kind of thing. So he did. So Jotham does this and shouts down, "Listen to me, you citizens of Shechem." I won't do that again. And may God listen to you. So Jotham now tells a parable. And a parable, you probably learned or even taught once upon a time that a parable is an earthly story with a heavenly meaning. Well done, Brad. I will not dispute that here at this time. And I will say that this little story that Jotham tells fits that. Not so much with a heavenly meaning as with a spiritual meaning that applies directly to God's people right now today. So it's more of an immediate parable. But some people want to just call it a fable or something, and I think they're going too far. You can call this a parable. So, one day the trees went out. This is the story now. One day the trees went out to anoint a king over themselves. He doesn't hide his meaning very deeply, does he? Ooh, who would anoint a king? I wonder. So they said to the olive tree, "Reign over us." But the olive tree answered them, "Should I stop giving my oil, which is used to honor both God and men, and sway over the trees?" So, what does this mean? Well, let's read another one. There are 3. Actually, there are 4. Okay? Then the trees said to the fig tree, "Come and reign over us." Oh, reign over us? This is a good place to tell you this. Abimelech, of course, is a Jew, right? Melech is the Hebrew word for king, or the Hebrew verb for to reign. Come and Melech over us. And his name is Abimelech. So it's really not very far away from the obvious in the account. Other languages in the immediate vicinity, like the Moabites, would have different vowels, but instead of Melech, they would say Molech. Do you recognize that name? When the Moabite god is around, they call him Moloch or Molech or whatever. So, king. But the fig tree answered them, "Should I stop giving my sweetness and my delicious fruit and sway over the trees?" So, who have we had so far? Olive tree, fig tree, right? Next, another one. Then the trees said to the vine, "Come and reign over us." But the vine answered them, "Should I stop producing my wine that cheers both God and man and sway over the trees?" Who are these trees in the parable? Well, they're the other sons of Gideon. Okay? So that they didn't want to be king. Abimelech made it sound like they're your rulers, but they weren't. One of them was like the olive tree. No, I want to give the people what I have and share it with them. And by the way, both God and man, did you see that appear a couple times here? So these are godly men. The olive tree, the fig tree, now the vine. No, I'm not going to stop producing my wine and have sway over the tree or reign over the trees. So not the brothers, but finally all the trees said to the thorn bush, come and reign over us. He doesn't disguise this very deeply, does he? Who's the thorn bush in the family? Abimelech. Yeah, he's the thorn bush. The thorn bush said to the trees, if you are really going to anoint me king over you, then come and take refuge in my shade. How much shade does a thorn bush give? Not much. I think a dandelion would give more shade than a thorn bush. Okay. But if not, may fire come out of the thorn bush and consume the cedars of Lebanon. Oh, may fire come out. This is going to happen later in the chapter. There's prophecy going on here. Okay. He continues. This is Jotham now yelling down at the top of the mountain. The parable's over. Jotham is now preaching. Now, if you have acted honorably and honestly in making Abimelech king, if you've done well by Jerubbaal and his family, and you have dealt with him as he deserved, for my father fought for you, risked his life, and rescued you from Midian, and yet you have attacked my father's family today. Notice he says you to the whole city of Shechem. Like, did they participate in the killing of the 70 sons? Huh? Kind of wonder. They killing his 70 sons on one stone and made Abimelech, the son of a slave woman, king over the citizens of Shechem because he's your brother. So if you have acted honorably, this guy's sentence is so long. If you have acted honorably and honestly with Jerubbaal and his house this day, then rejoice in Abimelech, that he also may rejoice in you. But if not, may fire come out from Abimelech and consume the citizens of Shechem and Beth Millo. Later, Abimelech is going to set fire to this city and burn it. So this is going to come true. And may fire come from the citizens of Shechem and Beth Millo and consume Abimelech. So he will meet his end as well. This is completely prophetic. I'm just illustrating that here by underlining some. Then, and by the way, your last look at him, Jotham fled, escaping to Beer, and he lived there out of sight of his brother Abimelech. He will not re-enter the scriptures. We have one passing reference to him, but he doesn't show up again. So he's gone. Where is this Beer? I'm not really sure. I have a theory, but it's just that. I don't even know if I should bother with it, but I'll tell you because I said it now. And that is, Beer is the Hebrew word for well. Like the well of the seven is Beersheba, which is down south of Judah in the land of Simeon. And just about the farthest southern real landmark you can figure out that belonged to Israel. And actually that would be the more famous of the Beers, of the Beerim, the wells of Israel. So maybe that one, maybe some other one. I don't know. Or maybe he did just slink back to Beer University. And who would like to go to Beer U? Wow, think of the t-shirts, okay. When Abimelech had ruled, now we're just switching gears now. When Abimelech had ruled over Israel 3 years, I should stop and talk about that verse. Because later on, When you think about this chapter, this might be the only detail that really comes up as being of lasting importance. How many kings ruled over Israel in the Old Testament? Well, in the northern kingdom, from Rehoboam to Zedekiah, there are 20. I'm sorry, the southern kingdom of Judah. In the northern kingdom of Israel, there are 20 from Jeroboam the first to Hoshea. That's 40, right? And before them, Saul, David, Solomon. Solomon's son is the father of Rehoboam, and Solomon's kingdom got divided and part got given to Jeroboam. So that's 43, right? So the question is, how many kings were there over Israel? And you could argue 43, or is it 44? Well, this guy didn't even invite the local tribes when he became king. What was he king over? One city? In fact, kind of a tree with a tower? You know, what's he king of? Does that count as being king over Israel? He wasn't even king over an entire tribe. So I think we're completely justified in ignoring Abimelech. In fact, I won't do that. But let's just ignore Abimelech, okay? I was going to have us all do this at Abimelech, but I won't do that. 23. Now, we have to talk about this verse too. God sent an evil spirit between Abimelech and the citizens of Shechem. Sent is the word in Hebrew. But I think that we would probably understand this better as God permitted, allowed an evil spirit to show up. The way that the lion tamer lifts up the gate, he doesn't really send the lion anywhere, does he? He just lets it in, that kind of thing. So God allows this to happen. God is, after all, not the author of evil or sin of any kind. But here he does it in order to accomplish something and to proclaim the law, really, to Abimelech. It needs to be done seriously and with real intent. So, and by the way, the evil spirit here is between Abimelech and the citizens of Shechem. This is the people who made him king and their king. So they've made a mistake, and now the mistake and the mistakers. Never heard that word before. The mistakers and the mistakee, I don't know. But anyway, they now they're against each other. They acted treacherously toward Abimelech, so that the crime against the 70 sons of Jerubbaal, by the way, verse 24 here is the proclamation of the Holy Spirit. This is God's judgment. So that the crime against the 70 sons of Jerubbaal might come to justice, and their blood would be avenged on their brother Abimelech, who killed them, and also on the citizens of Shechem, who had helped him to kill his brothers. You've been listening to Invisible Church, the Bible study podcast from St. Paul's Lutheran Church, New Ulm, Minnesota.